Yo, what is going on, guys? Flashverse here, and welcome back to another video on The Flash Season 7. This will be my review and breakdown for The Flash Season 7, Episode 5, titled Fear Me. And when you watch this episode, yeah, that is a very fitting title. So once again, this was another crazy episode of The Flash Season 7. Season 7 has been a blast, apart from Episode 3. But during this episode, there were a lot of cool moments once again taking place. Honestly, this episode kind of felt like a horror movie in some aspects. As you guys may already know, last episode we dealt with the Strength Force, but for today's episode we are exploring the Sage Force with Psych. That is the blue lightning from the different forces. So obviously the red lightning was the Strength Force, the blue lightning is the Sage Force, the green lightning is the Still Force, and the yellow lightning is the Speed Force. But obviously if you guys haven't watched the episode, then spoiler alert, because I will be going over some major spoilers which you certainly wouldn't want to hear from me. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, go watch it and then come back later for this breakdown. For those who are staying, be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you are aware of more Arrowverse content coming your way. Okay, so this episode kicks off with Barry rewatching the scene of him and Frueza's battle from the events of last episode, where we obviously saw Frueza, who is the user of the Strength Force, absorbing the antimatter bomb. Now, Barry mentions that he's able to track down Frueza's whereabouts from some sort of geothermic isotope which appears when Frueza is around. But later on during the episode, we obviously find out that it's not only Frueza who carries these geothermic isotopes, but it is all of the Force users, or at least it seems like it, because Psych has some geothermic isotopes as well. Now Caitlin and Cisco then come in and they show Barry that obviously Frost and Caitlin are now separate entities, and the freak out and the look on Barry and Iris's faces, that was priceless. It was such a funny opening scene and I really liked it. But then we head to Cecile at her house and she's pretty much working on the case, but we have this really ominous scene. Like, it's all dark and you can tell that something bad was about to happen. And we then have this really sinister voice calling Cecile's name, in which Cecile's about to panic and she's like looking around the house to see who is in the house. All of a sudden she just sees this person inside of her house who seems to be some sort of a serial killer in prison or something, and he's been strapped up like he's in some sort of an asylum. Yeah, that person keeps calling Cecile's name. This figure kept approaching Cecile, and we have Cecile losing her mind, the glass shatters and everything. Her hands start bleeding. So yeah, she's panicking because this nightmare she had, it seems very real. But obviously Joe then comes and he basically calms Cecile down, telling that nobody is over there. But we then head over to the lounge where Team Flash are obviously gathered together, and Frost and Caitlin explain how they were able to split. Now Caitlin wants to solve this issue and they want to put them back into the same body. And Frost seems to be disturbed by it, as you can tell from the look on her face during that scene. Now Cisco then name drops this Strength Force user as Frueza, as it is Spanish for strong. He says that because She-Hulk was taken, so he needed another name, which I thought was pretty cool. But then we get another geothermal isotope reading, but this time we have all the lightning colors scattering across the lounge in Star Labs, and Barry rushes to check who it is, only to find the body of Nora Allen, obviously the embodiment of the Speed Force. It's not the real Nora Allen. But the Speed Force is on a coma, but that doesn't affect Barry's speed in any way, which you would expect it should have, but it just doesn't. Now Caitlin doesn't know how to treat a cosmic being like Speed Force, so they need a way to see whether the Speed Force is actually recovering or are they still at the same state which they were in once she dropped after that storm. Barry then gets this idea to put the speed gauge onto the Speed Force's wrist so he could actually monitor to see if she's fine, where obviously if it's blinking red that means she's not okay, but when it shifts to yellow and green, that means that she's fine. Now Iris then pays a visit to Joe about one of her cases, and Joe could basically have this potential lead in which Iris is investigating. Now Iris does mention that this person felt like they were in a nightmare, in which Joe is able to connect the dots together, in which he's like, okay, Cecile had a nightmare around the same time this person had a nightmare as well, so that is something that's going on. But then Kristen Kramer arrives and tells Joe where she is from, and she realizes that Joe is busy because he sat there with his daughter. So Kristen is just like, okay, I'll come at another time, you seem to be busy right now. However, Iris feels that there's something really sketchy about her. So we do have the storyline with Iris investigating Kristen Kramer, which I will obviously get to later on. Now, Cisco's adjusting the Firestorm Matrix to basically fuse Frost and Caitlin back together so they are back into one entity rather than being separate entities. You can tell Frost is not happy by this. She is happy being separate to Caitlin, and you could clearly see that. Like, she's disturbed when she finds out that Cisco found a way to bring Caitlin and Frost back together. But Cisco then leaves the room, and we have Frost sabotaging the Firestorm Matrix because she doesn't want to split with Caitlin. She wants to stay separate to Caitlin, which you would obviously understand that, like, you know, Frost wants to live a separate life to Caitlin, and that, like, you know, she has her own freedom in a separate body to Caitlin. So you do understand where Frost is obviously coming from. Now we then head over back to the Cortex in Star Labs, and we have Cecile arriving, and she's basically looking for Caitlin because she felt something. But she tells Barry that she had some sort of a nightmare and it felt very, very real. So basically she wants to know what is going on by it, and she's suspecting that it's due to her powers evolving, so she's just feeling these some sort of nightmares. But Barry then gets an alert in which Cecile basically feels something again, but Barry knows that something is up. Now when Barry heads over to the area where the alert came from, we basically have this crow truck and like a bunch of people hallucinating this massive Godzilla-like monster, in which when Barry arrives to the scene, he's wondering what is going on. He's looking at the cops, he's like, wait, what's happening? Because he turns around and he sees nothing, but these cops are shooting at what they're hallucinating. Now this is when we have Psych arriving, and his effects were really, really cool, especially when he was like, you know, walking and speaking. We had these like, you know, slight glitches and like his movements and stuff. It was really, really cool seeing that. It did have this, you know, quite gothic tone, which is something I really liked. But Barry quickly places metacuffs on Psych. But little does he know, the metacuffs do not work on Psych, in which Psych ends up giving Barry a nightmare, his worst nightmare. And we then cut to Barry's nightmare, and this was a really, really cool scene. I really enjoyed it despite how short it was. We see Reverse Flash arrive, and he basically like, you know, speeds up and he basically puts Flash on the ground, and we get this short and sweet battle between them, and Reverse Flash says like time to repent or something, and he goes and attacks his legs and puts him on the ground. I thought that was really, really cool seeing Reverse Flash back. But then we see this white lightning appear, and we see Savitar, and as Barry turns around, we see Savitar right in front of Barry, which was really, really sick. Turns out I was right during my trailer breakdown. That tall figure turned out to be Savitar, so I was right, I guess. But Savitar ends up stabbing Barry across the chest, kind of like what Savitar did with Iris back in season 3. Like, he stabbed Barry in the exact same way. So I thought that was a pretty cool parallel to see. But just seeing these two characters returning was so cool, despite it being for a short amount of time. I wish Zoom was there as well, because we had Reverse Flash, we saw Savitar, and we had the slight DeVoe reference, and if we had Zoom as well, that would have been really, really sick. But it is what it is. This was a little treat of its own as well. But we also have Barry collapsing in the real world, bleeding. So he carries this vision of him bleeding and getting stabbed all the way to the real world, which I thought was pretty interesting. Now, in the med bay, Barry talks about how real his vision was, in which Cecile mentions that she also had a vision when Barry was hallucinating. And we find out that if you die in the vision, then you die in real life. So that's a challenge that they're going to have to face. Now, Barry asks Cisco if they could basically use that device which prevented being mind controlled by Grodd to avoid getting nightmares by Psych, and whether it's worth a shot to, like, you know, reverse engineer that device so it prevents Psych from using his powers on Team Flash. So Cisco heads over there and basically gives that a go. Now we then cut to CCPD, and we basically have Iris finding some fishy stuff about Kristen Kramer after her investigation. She was basically able to find out that she's someone that can't be trusted, and she's there for like a reason. And I really like this Iris investigation thing, despite how short it was. It would have been really cool if we actually got to see Iris digging deeper into Kristen Kramer. I would have thought that that would have been a very, very interesting storyline to explore. Because whenever Iris works on these investigation stuffs and things like that, I really, really enjoy them. But we then have Caitlin, who is mad at Frost because she sabotaged the Firestorm Matrix so that they cannot fuse back together, and that it will take months to come up with a brand new solution to basically fuse them back together. Now, Frost mentions that she doesn't want to fuse back, and she basically likes living a separate life rather than living in one body, which ends up troubling Caitlin. And Cisco ends up getting another geothermic isotope reading, in which Psych is obviously out there again. Now we then have Team Flash go to confront Psych, but the telepathic crown, which they used from Grodd and reverse engineered so that Psych cannot use his powers on them, is useless. It's of no use, and Frost ends up getting a vision. Now her vision is basically her getting arrested, foreshadowing to episode 7, where we will see Frost getting arrested due to Chillblaine framing her. That is a storyline which we will see from the episode 7 synopsis, so we do know that that will be a storyline for episode 7. So that leads me to believe, like, is this something which will end up happening, or is it like some sort of vision with just Caitlin fears herself, or shall I say Frost, now that they're separate? But that is basically Frost's biggest nightmare, is Caitlin turning on Frost. Now obviously when Frost gets arrested during episode 7, I doubt Caitlin will do that. I think Frost will get caught in the act, and we will obviously get to that later on during this review. But the real question is, what did Cisco see? Because Cisco says, no, this cannot be how it ends, but we do not see Cisco's vision. So does he probably end up seeing the future which plays out in the season or something like that? We do obviously have him covering it up by saying that he sees Camilla die, but that's definitely a lie. We know that he's lying. It seems like he saw something much deeper, and I cannot wait to see what it is. Now Barry tries to throw lightning, in which Psych, just like Frueza, was able to absorb it like it was nothing. So that was very overpowered, but it was really badass on Psych's point as well. So that was something I really liked. But over here, Barry is put through another nightmare, and this time all of his loved ones are dead in CCPD. Now, in the aftermath of that, we have Barry and Cisco still recovering from that traumatic vision which they saw. Obviously, you could tell that Cisco's was way worse than Barry's because Cisco didn't want to talk about it at all. In fact, we didn't even get to see it, so it's definitely got to be something which will play out later on. But Barry's obviously frustrated that he's unable to defeat Psych because just like Frueza, he's way too overpowered. Now we then head to the speed lab where Frost is basically trying to fix the Firestorm Matrix, but she just ends up making it worse. So obviously that Caitlin is happy and they could fuse back into the one body. But Caitlin arrives and basically talks with Frost, and she mentions that she's fine with both of them living their own lives and they could live as sisters, so that was something I really like. But Barry and Cecile end up talking about their fears, and Cecile talks about how basically she had these visions every time Psych used his powers. So she had more visions than anybody else which had their visions, and that's obviously due to their powers being connected, like they're both telepaths if you want to say. But we have this great talk from Cecile where she helps Barry basically run through the fear, if you want to say, and basically overcome it. Barry comes up with a plan with Cecile where basically they redirect the fear back onto Psych. So they basically end up using DeVoe's chair to reach it to a grander scale, and basically ends up saving everyone in the city, not just one person. So that was something very cool to see. So we then have Psych sending this fear wave all across the city. So basically he's causing more chaos and more fear across the city. Now Barry tries to run through the barrier, but he's thrown into another nightmare once again. But this time his friends are zombies, and they blame Barry for their deaths, which was very interesting. And Iris did mention like something about their kids, so will we see Iris become pregnant this season or not? I am very interested to see what will be going on over here. Obviously for episode 17 we know that we will be seeing Bart Allen, so are we going to see Iris become pregnant and then we end up seeing future Bart Allen during episode 17? I'm not entirely sure. Now Cecile ends up giving Barry another pep talk because Barry's just too afraid and he just cannot face this fear. So Cecile gives Barry another pep talk in which Barry is able to run through the barrier while Cecile is able to stop Psych from using his powers through DeVoe's chair, and she's basically helping the people at a grander scale. Now Psych is defeated, however we do see him disintegrate and go away. Now the thing is, we do know that he will be back for more episodes. He is there for episode 5, which we just saw, but he's also there for episodes 10 and 11 as well, so we do know that Psych will be back, so he is not defeated. So it seems like, all these different versions of the forces. So like Psych could be the embodiment of the Sage Force, so he just cannot die. Frueza could be the embodiment of the Strength Force, stuff like that, I'm guessing. Now Barry ends up experiencing more headaches after Psych has been defeated, so he basically goes back to cryo sleep while Team Flash find out what is happening. But this is when we have Nora Allen, or the embodiment of the Speed Force, waking up from her coma, and she mentions that both Psych and Frueza have attacked the Speed Force and they were just too powerful to handle. But yeah, this is a very interesting storyline with the forces and all of that. Does it seem like all of these forces will be the main villains facing off against the Speed Force? I'm not entirely sure. I will probably end up doing an ending explained video in like the next couple of days, where I have more time to think about what's happening and just theorize about it more, rather than just giving you guys my quick initial thoughts after I watch the episode. But before the end credit scene with the whole Speed Force waking up, we have Kristen Kramer mentioning that she doesn't like the way the CCPD, or more specifically Joe, are handling metahumans, and there's one metahuman in particular which Kristen Kramer wants to go after, and that is obviously Killer Frost. She mentions Killer Frost, no longer Frost, because she still wants Frost to pay for the crimes that she's done in the past, and I cannot wait to see what happens over there. But overall, this was a really great episode. Once again, another awesome episode of The Flash, and for this episode I will give an 8.5 out of 10. But yeah guys, thanks for watching. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please give a like and subscribe. Be sure to tell me in the comment section down below what you guys thought about this episode. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video.